The morning sun over Earth cast long shadows across the Pacific Ocean when the sky turned black. Admiral Chen Liu stood on the bridge of the starship Defiance, watching through the massive viewing window as shapes began to appear above the clouds. They were not human ships. The alien vessels looked like giant crystals floating in space. Each one was the size of a city, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that hurt to look at. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They blocked out the sun completely, turning day into night across half the planet. Chen had been in space for 20 years. She had fought pirates, rebels, and madmen. But she had never seen anything like this. Her hands shook slightly as she gripped the command chair. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission," said Lieutenant Park, her communications officer. His voice was steady, but Chen could see the fear in his eyes. "Put it through," Chen ordered. The main screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. It had no eyes that Chen could recognize, just smooth, crystal-like skin that seemed to shift and move. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once, filling the bridge like thunder. "We are the Zephyrian hegemony. Your species has been selected for processing. You have 1 hour to surrender all military vessels. Resistance will result in immediate termination." The transmission ended. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. Chen looked around at her crew. These were good people, trained soldiers who had sworn to protect Earth. They were looking at her now, waiting for orders. "Send word to all ships," Chen said quietly. "We fight." The battle began 30 minutes later. Earth's combined fleet was the pride of human engineering. 200 ships of various sizes, armed with the most advanced weapons humanity had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, their engines burning bright against the darkness. The Zephyrian ships didn't even seem to notice them at first. When the aliens finally responded, it was like watching giants step on ants. Beams of pure energy shot from the crystal ships, each one wider than a football field. When they hit human vessels, the ships didn't just explode. They seemed to dissolve, breaking apart into tiny pieces that were then pulled toward the alien ships like metal to a magnet. But the worst part wasn't the destruction. It was what happened to the crews. Chen watched in horror as the remains of destroyed ships were absorbed into the crystal hulls. But it wasn't just the metal and plastic that was taken. Something else went with it, something that made the alien ships glow brighter after each kill. "Admiral," Park's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm reading energy signatures from inside their ships. It's human brain patterns. They're still alive in there." Chen felt her blood turn to ice. The aliens weren't just killing humans. They were trapping their souls, their minds, their very consciousness inside those crystal prisons. Forever. All. "Ships, concentrate fire on the lead vessel," Chen ordered. "Give everything you have." The human fleet opened fire with everything they had. Nuclear missiles, plasma cannons, rail guns that could punch holes through asteroids. The weapons struck the lead Zephyrian ship and created a light show that could be seen from Earth's surface. When the light faded, the alien ship was undamaged. Not even a scratch on its crystal surface. Chen's ship was one of the last to die. As Zephyrian energy beams tore through the Defiance, she made her way to the communications center. Emergency lights flickered red as the ship shook apart around her. Lieutenant Park was still at his station, blood running down his face from a head wound. "Admiral, the quantum array is still working. We can send one last message." "Do it," Chen said. "Activate Protocol Lazarus." Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in bunkers that had been built in secret over the past 50 years, quantum communication arrays hummed to life. These devices were humanity's greatest scientific achievement, though few people knew they existed. They could send messages not just across space but across dimensions to other versions of Earth in parallel universes. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been the lead scientist on the project. She was in Bunker 7, buried 3 miles under the Rocky Mountains, when the activation order came through. Her hands moved quickly across the control panels, inputting the codes that would send humanity's final message across the dimensional barriers. The message was simple, but it carried with it all the data from the battle above. Video recordings, sensor readings, everything they had learned about the Zephyrians in their final hour. "This is Earth Prime," Elena spoke into the transmitter. "We are dying. They attacked Earth first. The Zephyrians take not just our lives, but our souls. They trap consciousness in their ships to power their technology. 17 parallel dimensions are receiving this message. Learn from our death. Remember our sins. Make them pay." Above ground, the Zephyrian ships had begun their final work. Energy beams swept across Earth's surface, not to destroy cities, but to harvest the billions of humans living in them. The beams didn't kill quickly. They dissolved human bodies slowly, allowing the aliens to extract every bit of life force, every spark of consciousness. In New York, families held each other as the beams swept through their apartments. In Tokyo, soldiers fired uselessly at the sky as their friends dissolved around them. In London, children cried for parents who were no longer there to comfort them. The harvest took 6 hours. When it was complete, Earth was silent. The oceans still moved, the wind still blew, but there were no voices left to speak, no hearts left to beat, no dreams left to dream. The Zephyrian ships hung in orbit for another day, processing their new harvest. Inside their crystal hulls, billions of human minds screamed silently, trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Their consciousness would power Zephyrian technology for thousands of years, feeling every moment of their captivity. High Conductor Zeltheris reviewed the harvest reports with satisfaction. This species, called humans, had provided more life force than expected. Their emotional capacity was unusually high, which made them excellent batteries for Zephyrian ships. "Prepare for departure," Zeltheris commanded. "Set course for the next system. The galaxy has many more worlds to harvest." But as the Zephyrian fleet prepared to leave Earth's solar system, something was happening in the quantum realm that they could not detect. Elena's message had been received. Across 17 different dimensions, 17 different versions of humanity were learning about Earth Prime's fate, and they were angry. On Earth Delta, where humans had reached the stars 2 centuries earlier, Admiral Sarah Chen read the quantum message with growing fury. Her Earth's technology was more advanced, their ships faster and stronger. On Earth Gamma, where humanity had never abandoned their warrior traditions, Warlord Marcus Kane gathered his clan leaders. Their ships were crude, but their hearts were filled with rage. On Earth Beta, where artificial intelligence and human consciousness had merged, the collective entity called Atom Prime calculated revenge scenarios that made quantum computers weep. 17 different versions of humanity began to prepare for war. But this would not be a war of defense or survival. This would be a war of vengeance, fought with the darkest aspects of human nature. The Zephyrians had made a mistake. They had attacked Earth first, yes. But more importantly, they had shown 17 different versions of humanity exactly what they were capable of. And humanity's greatest sin was about to echo across the void. Admiral Sarah Chen felt the quantum message burn through her mind like fire. She stood in the command center of the Starship Victory, Earth Delta's flagship, as the impossible transmission played over and over in her head. Images of her parallel, self-dying above another Earth. Images of humanity being harvested like crops. Earth Delta was different from the dead world the Zephyrians had just consumed. Here, humans had reached the stars in 1969, riding nuclear pulse engines to the outer planets before most other Earths had even landed on their moon. Their technology was 2 centuries ahead of Earth Prime, their ships faster, and their weapons more deadly. But Sarah Chen was still human, and the message from her dying parallel self had awakened something dark in her heart. "Ma'am," called out Lieutenant Torres from the sensor station. "We have contacts at the edge of the solar system. 7 ships, crystal configuration. They match the patterns from the quantum message." Sarah smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Zephyrian scouts. They think they're going to do to, us what they did to Earth Prime." She turned to her crew. "They're wrong. Unlike Earth Prime, Earth Delta had time to prepare. The quantum message had arrived 6 hours before the Zephyrian scouts entered their solar system. 6 hours was enough time to implement protocols that had been theoretical until today. Sarah's ship could phase in and out of normal space, a technology stolen from experiments with dimensional barriers. Her fleet of 50 vessels was smaller than Earth Prime's had been, but each ship was equipped with weapons that violated several known laws of physics. The Zephyrian scouts approached Earth Delta exactly as they had approached Earth Prime. 7 crystal ships, moving in perfect formation, sending the same ultimatum about surrender and processing. Sarah Chen's response was different. Her ships phased out of normal space just as the Zephyrian energy beams fired. The alien weapons struck empty vacuum, while the human fleet materialized directly behind the enemy vessels. At point-blank range, Sarah's ships opened fire with weapons that tore holes in reality itself. The Zephyrian scouts died in the first 30 seconds of combat. But Sarah wasn't satisfied with simple destruction. Her ships were equipped with quantum extractors, devices that could pull consciousness out of the crystal matrices where it was stored. "How many souls were trapped in those ships?" Sarah asked her science officer. "Approximately 4 million, Admiral. Various species, some of them thousands of years old. Free them all, and then send a message to the main Zephyrian fleet. Tell them we're coming." 3,000 light-years away, on Earth Gamma, Warlord Marcus Kane received the quantum message while standing in the Hall of War. His Earth had never abandoned the old ways. Technology had advanced, but humanity still organized itself into clans and tribes. Their ships were crude compared to Earth Delta's fleet, but they had something the other Earths lacked: an absolute mastery of violence. Marcus Kane was 7 feet tall and covered in scars from a lifetime of battle. His people had spent centuries fighting each other, perfecting the art of war until it became a form of worship. When the quantum message showed him images of humans being harvested, something primal awakened in his soul. "Gather the clan leaders," Kane commanded. "All of them. The Bloodhawks, the Iron Wolves, the Death Speakers, every warrior clan on the planet." Within hours, representatives from 200 clans had gathered in the Hall of War. These were people who had been enemies for generations, who had feuded over territory and honor and ancient grudges. But the quantum message had united them with a single purpose. "Brothers and sisters," Kane's voice echoed through the hall, "we have learned of a great evil, an alien race that feeds on the souls of humans. They have murdered an entire Earth, trapped billions of our people in eternal torment." The hall erupted in angry voices. Clan leaders who had not spoken to each other in decades now stood together, their faces twisted with rage. "What do we do, Warlord?" asked Chief Reyna of the Bloodhawks. Kane smiled, showing teeth that had been filed to points in the old tradition. "We hunt them. We make them suffer. We show them what happens when they prey on humanity." Earth Gamma's fleet was built for boarding actions and close combat. Their ships were heavily armored but slow, designed to ram enemy vessels and deploy warriors directly into hostile territory. Each ship carried weapons that were ancient by galactic standards, blades, clubs, and tools designed to inflict maximum pain. But the warriors of Earth Gamma had something the Zephyrians had never encountered. They enjoyed causing fear almost as much as they enjoyed victory. On Earth Beta, the the quantum message reached a very different kind of humanity. Here, the line between human consciousness and artificial intelligence had been erased centuries ago. The collective entity known as Atom Prime represented the merged thoughts of 3 billion humans and their AI partners. Atom Prime existed as pure thought, inhabiting bodies only when physical action was required. It could think at the speed of light, process information faster than any computer, and calculate probability matrices that spanned entire galactic clusters. When the quantum message arrived, Atom Prime experienced something it had not felt in centuries: raw, primitive emotion. The logical part of its consciousness tried to suppress the feeling, but the human elements were stronger. They demanded vengeance. Atom Prime began manufacturing weapons, not just physical devices, but conceptual weapons that attacked the very idea of existence. It created viruses that infected thought itself, turning enemy consciousness against itself. It designed nightmare scenarios that would make enemy minds beg for death. The fleet that Atom Prime constructed was small, only 12 ships. But each vessel contained technology that should not have been possible, matter converters that could turn enemy ships into anything Atom Prime desired, mind bridges that could force enemy consciousness to experience every moment of suffering they had ever caused. Across the 17 parallel Earths, similar preparations were taking place. Each humanity was different, but they all shared one trait: an unlimited capacity for creative cruelty when their survival was threatened. Earth Epsilons, humans had evolved enhanced physical abilities. Their ships were living organisms, bred for war, that could regenerate from almost any damage. Earth Zeta's humans had mastered temporal manipulation. Their weapons could age enemy ships by millions of years in seconds, or trap enemy consciousness in time loops that lasted forever. Earth Theta's humans had become masters of psychological warfare. Their ships broadcast fear directly into enemy minds, turning ally against ally through carefully crafted terror. Each Earth began constructing dimensional gates, massive structures that would allow their fleets to move between parallel universes. The gates required enormous amounts of energy and would permanently damage the barriers between dimensions. But none of the 17 humanities cared about the cost. Dr. Elena Vasquez, working from her bunker beneath the dead Earth Prime, coordinated the effort. She had survived the harvest by sheer luck, hidden 3 miles underground in a bunker the Zephyrians had not detected. Now she worked to guide the parallel Earths toward their common enemy. The Zephyrian hegemony controls 12,000 star systems, Elena broadcast to the other dimensions. They have been harvesting species for millennia. Trillions of consciousness are trapped in their ships, powering their technology. How many ships in their fleet? Asked Admiral Chen from Earth Delta. Conservative estimate, 50,000 vessels of various sizes. Their main fleet is located in the galactic core, around a cluster of black holes they use as energy sources. 50,000 ships, said Warlord Kane from Earth Gamma. Good. My warriors were getting bored, Atom Prime's synthetic voice crackled, across the quantum channel. I have calculated 17 different attack vectors. Each Earth will target specific Zephyrian assets. The goal is not just victory, but absolute psychological destruction of their species. The plan that emerged over the next several hours was complex and brutal. Each parallel Earth would attack different parts of the Zephyrian Empire simultaneously. But this would not be a war of conquest or liberation. This would be a war of education. The 17 humanities were going to teach the Zephyrians what it meant to be afraid. Elena Vasquez made the final transmission from her bunker. Remember, the goal is not just to stop them. The goal is to make sure that when other species hear the name Zephyrian, they remember what happened when they attacked humanity first. Across 17 dimensions, humanity prepared for war, but they were not preparing to fight as heroes. They were preparing to fight as the monsters they had always been capable of becoming. The Zephyrians had awakened something that had been sleeping in the human soul, something dark and terrible and absolutely merciless. They were about to learn why, across every dimension, every version of humanity had the same ancient warning. Do not wake the sleeping giant. High Conductor Zeltharis had ruled the Zephyrian hegemony for 3,000 years. In that time, the crystal being had overseen the harvest of 400 different species across 12,000 star systems. Each conquest had followed the same pattern: overwhelming force, quick surrender, efficient processing. The humans of Earth Prime had been no different. Their resistance had lasted 6 hours, which was actually longer than most species managed. Now their consciousness powered Zephyrian ships across the galaxy, their life force feeding the crystal matrices that kept the hegemony strong. Zeltharis was reviewing harvest reports in the command center of the flagship Eternal Radiance when the first anomalous readings appeared. The sensor operator, a junior crystal named Velcon, approached with obvious nervousness. High Conductor, we have unknown contacts emerging from dimensional rifts in sectors 7 through 15. The energy signatures are unusual. Zeltharis studied the sensor data. The readings showed ships that should not have been able to exist. Some appeared to be phasing in and out of normal space. Others seemed to be aging and regenerating simultaneously. A few registered as being in multiple locations at once. Origin? Zeltharis asked. Unknown, High Conductor, but their weapon signatures match the species we recently processed. They appear to be human. Zeltharis felt something that crystal beings rarely experienced: confusion. The humans had been harvested completely, every one of their ships destroyed, every one of their worlds processed. There should be no humans left anywhere in the galaxy. The answer came 30 minutes later, when the first attack began. Processing Station Vel 9 was a massive crystal structure orbiting a dead star in the Kepler system. It housed the consciousness of 23 different species, including the newly acquired humans from Earth Prime. The station was defended by 12 Zephyrian warships and was considered completely secure. Admiral Sarah Chen's fleet materialized directly inside the station's defensive perimeter. The human ships from Earth Delta moved like ghosts, phasing through solid matter when it suited them, becoming solid only when they wanted to fire their weapons. Their guns didn't shoot energy or projectiles. They shot holes in reality itself, tears in space that pulled Zephyrian ships into dimensional voids where physics had no meaning. But Sarah Chen wasn't there to destroy the processing station. She was there to liberate it, target the consciousness. Matrices, she ordered. Free everyone who's trapped in there. The human ships used quantum extractors to pull trapped souls out of the crystal storage systems. Billions of consciousness suddenly found themselves free after centuries of torment. Some were human, but many were from species the Zephyrians had harvested long before Earth Prime existed. Among the freed souls was a being called Kethvar, who had been trapped for 2,000 years. Its people, the Andromedans, had been peaceful, explorers before the Zephyrians found them. Now, Kethvar spoke with the voice of accumulated rage. Admiral Chen, the alien consciousness communicated through the ship's quantum field. My people were artists and philosophers. The Zephyrians turned us into batteries. How can we help you make them suffer? Sarah smiled coldly. Spread the word. Tell every species in the galaxy what's happening. Tell them humanity is hunting the Zephyrians. Tell them to stay out of our way. The attack on Processing Station Vel 9 lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, the station was empty of trapped consciousness, but otherwise intact. Sarah Chen had left it standing as a message. The Zephyrians could no longer protect their most secure installations, but she had also left something else. Hidden deep in the station's crystal matrices was a virus created by Adam Prime from Earth Beta. It would spread slowly through the Zephyrian communication network, carrying with it images and sounds from the battle. Every Zephyrian in the galaxy would eventually see what had happened at Vel 9. The message was simple. Humanity was coming. 2 days later, Warlord Marcus Kane's fleet struck a Zephyrian military outpost in the Rigel system. The warriors of Earth Gamma approached warfare very differently than Admiral Chen's technical specialists. Kane's ships were built for ramming. They slammed into Zephyrian vessels at maximum speed, their armored hulls tearing through crystal superstructures like hammers through glass. But the real attack began when the warriors teleported aboard the enemy ships. The Zephyrians had never experienced hand-to-hand combat. Their species had evolved beyond physical violence millions of years ago, preferring the clean efficiency of energy weapons and consciousness harvesting. They were not prepared for humans who fought with sharpened metal and enjoyed the sound of their enemies' fear. Kane himself led the boarding of the command ship. The Zephyrian crew tried to surrender when they saw the 7-foot-tall human covered in scars and carrying weapons that belonged in a museum. Kane's response was to laugh. "You don't understand," he told the terrified crystal beings as his warriors surrounded them. "We're not here to accept your surrender. We're here to teach you what terror feels like." The warriors of Earth Gamma didn't kill quickly. They took time to explain to each Zephyrian exactly why they were dying. They described in detail what had happened to Earth Prime, how billions of humans had been trapped in eternal torment. They made sure each enemy understood that this was personal. But Kane's people did something else that was uniquely human. They recorded everything. Every scream, every plea for mercy, every moment of Zephyrian suffering was captured and broadcast across their communication networks. "Let the galaxy see what happens to those who hunt humans," Kane declared as he stood over the broken remains of the Zephyrian commander. "Let them know that we are the monsters in the dark now." The third attack came from a direction the Zephyrians had not expected, inside their own minds. Adam Prime's ships from Earth Beta appeared near the Hegemony's administrative center in the Vega system. But they didn't attack the Zephyrian fleet directly. Instead, they established mind bridges with the crystal beings, forcing direct consciousness-to-consciousness contact. The Zephyrians discovered that Adam Prime had done something impossible. It had created a virus that infected thought itself. The human-AI hybrid forced each Zephyrian to experience every moment of suffering that the trapped consciousness in their ships had endured. Centuries of torment compressed into minutes of absolute agony. But Adam Prime went further. It didn't just make the Zephyrians feel their victims' pain. It made them understand it. Each crystal being suddenly comprehended the horror of what they had been doing, the magnitude of suffering they had caused across thousands of years. Some Zephyrians went insane immediately. Others tried to flee, only to discover that the mental virus followed them wherever they went. A few tried to destroy their own ships rather than continue experiencing the accumulated pain of their victims. Admiral Zek Tharis, commanding the defense of the Vega system, sent a desperate message to High Conductor Zel Tharis. "The humans are not fighting a war. They are conducting an education program. They want us to understand what we are." The attacks continued across 17 different star systems simultaneously. Each parallel Earth brought its own interpretation of warfare, its own unique way of causing suffering. Earth Epsilon's biological ships infected Zephyrian vessels with living metal that slowly consumed their crystal hulls, while keeping the crew alive to experience every moment of their ship's death. Earth Zeta's temporal manipulators trapped entire Zephyrian fleets in time loops, forcing them to experience their own destruction over and over for subjective centuries. Earth Theta's psychological warfare specialists broadcast pure terror directly into Zephyrian minds, turning their own thoughts against them until they begged for death. High Conductor Zeltharis watched the reports pour in from across the hegemony. In 3 days, humanity had struck at 47 different targets. They had freed billions of trapped consciousness and turned thousands of Zephyrian warriors into gibbering wrecks. But the worst part was the pattern. The humans weren't trying to conquer Zephyrian territory or steal their resources. They were systematically destroying the hegemony's ability to feel safe anywhere in the galaxy. High Conductor, reported Senior Crystal Mech Yaris, we have received communication from the other galactic powers. The Andromedans, the Centauri Federation, the Orion Trade Alliance. They are offering military assistance against the human threat. Zeltharis considered this. The Zephyrian hegemony had always been the dominant power in the galaxy, but they had never faced an enemy like this. The humans fought like nothing that had ever existed. They seemed to enjoy causing fear more than achieving victory. Accept their offer, Zeltharis decided. Send word to all allied species. The humans must be stopped before they spread their violence to other worlds. What Zeltharis didn't know was that the other galactic powers were not offering help out of friendship. They were terrified. Ancient monitoring stations left by long-dead species had begun broadcasting warnings across normal space. The humans are using Voidwalker technology. All species must unite or face extinction. Every major civilization in the galaxy had received the same message. The humans were not just fighting the Zephyrians. They were using weapons and techniques that threatened the structural integrity of reality itself. The ancient monitoring station had been drifting in empty space for 50 million years. Built by a species whose name was lost to time, it had watched civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy. But now, for the first time in eons, it was broadcasting an emergency signal. Warning to all sentient species, the message repeated across every known communication frequency. The dimensional barriers are failing. The humans are using Voidwalker technology. Reality itself is at risk. All species must unite or face extinction. The message reached every major civilization simultaneously. On the crystal homeworld of the Zephyrians, High Conductor Zeltharis studied the data with growing alarm. The monitoring station's sensors were detecting massive tears in the fabric of space-time, centered around every location where human forces had attacked. The humans are not just fighting us, Zeltharis reported to the Emergency Council. They are weakening the boundaries between dimensions. If this continues, our entire universe could collapse. Similar meetings were taking place across the galaxy. The Andromedans, a species of peaceful explorers, found themselves discussing military intervention for the first time in their history. The Centauri Federation, masters of defensive warfare, began mobilizing their battle fleets. Even the mysterious Orion Trade Alliance, who had remained neutral in galactic conflicts for millennia, agreed to contribute their most advanced ships. Within days, the largest military alliance in galactic history had formed. 7 species, representing billions of worlds, united by a single terrifying realization. Humanity had to be stopped before they destroyed everything. The Allied fleet assembled in the void between galaxies, far from any star system. Over 3 million ships of various sizes and designs, carrying the combined military might of galactic civilization. At its head was the Zephyrian flagship Eternal Radiance, now commanded by High Conductor Zeltharis personally. But the aliens had made a fundamental error. They thought they were fighting a conventional war against a dangerous enemy. They didn't understand that humanity had moved beyond such simple concepts as victory and defeat. Dr. Elena Vasquez monitored the alien fleet's movements from her bunker beneath Dead Earth Prime. Around her, quantum computers processed data from 17 different dimensions, coordinating humanity's response across parallel universes. "They're taking the bait," she reported to the other Earths. "The combined fleet is moving toward the dimensional anchor point, exactly as we predicted." Admiral Sarah Chen's voice crackled through the quantum channel from Earth Delta. Elena, are you sure about this? Once we begin the Great Accounting, there's no going back. The 17 Earths will be cut off from each other forever. Elena stared at the screens showing the alien fleet. 3 million ships, all of them filled with beings who thought they were the heroes of this story. They couldn't understand that they were about to face judgment for crimes they didn't even know they had committed. They harvested Earth Prime, Elena said quietly. They trapped billions of human souls to power their ships. And they've been doing the same thing to other species for thousands of years. The galaxy needs to learn what happens when you treat consciousness like a resource to be consumed. Warlord Marcus Kane's savage laughter echoed through the channel. My warriors are ready, Elena. We've been preparing for this moment since the quantum message arrived. The enemy wants to meet us in the void? Perfect. No witnesses, no survivors, no mercy. Adam Prime's synthetic voice joined the conversation. I have calculated the probability matrices. The Great Accounting will succeed, but the cost will be enormous. Reality itself will bear scars that may never heal. The dimensional barriers will be permanently weakened. Good, Elena replied. Let the universe remember what happened here. Let it remember that when you attack humanity first, you don't just face our weapons. You face our judgment. The 17 parallel humanities had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Each Earth had constructed massive dimensional gates, structures that required the energy output of entire star systems to operate. The gates would allow all 17 human fleets to converge at a single point in space-time, bringing together military forces from across the multiverse. But the gates served another purpose. They were designed to create a reality storm, a localized collapse of dimensional barriers that would make certain weapons possible. Weapons that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, except in the space between universes where the normal rules didn't apply. The alien fleet reached the dimensional anchor point first. High Conductor Zell Theris studied the empty region of space where ancient monitoring stations had detected the worst reality distortions. It was a place where no stars shone, where space itself seemed thin and fragile. Begin wide-spectrum scans, Zell Theris ordered. The humans will have to appear somewhere in this region. When they do, we'll be ready. The first human ships began materializing an hour later. Admiral Chen's fleet from Earth Delta phased into normal space directly in front of the alien formation. Their vessels looked different now, modified with technology that hurt to look at directly. But Chen's ships were just the beginning. More fleets continued to appear as the dimensional gates activated across 17 parallel universes. Warlord Kane's savage warriors materialized in battle formation, their crude ships somehow looking more dangerous than before. Adam Prime's perfect vessels appeared next, their hulls gleaming with mathematical precision. Earth after Earth added their forces to the growing human armada. Ships that aged and regenerated simultaneously, vessels that existed in multiple dimensions at once, warships that broadcast pure terror directly into enemy minds. Within minutes, 17 different versions of humanity's military might floated in the void, facing an alien fleet that outnumbered them 100 to 1. High Conductor Zell Theris felt something approaching satisfaction. The humans had finally revealed themselves, concentrating their forces in a single location where they could be destroyed once and for all. All ships, prepare to fire, Zell Theris commanded. Target the human vessels. Show them the price of threatening galactic stability. But Elena Vasquez had one more surprise waiting. From her bunker beneath Earth Prime, she activated the final component of humanity's plan. Hidden among the 17 human fleets were devices that had taken months to construct. Reality anchors, machines that could temporarily stabilize the fabric of space-time itself. As the alien fleet prepared to attack, Elena spoke across all dimensional channels simultaneously. People of the galaxy, Her voice reached every ship in the alien fleet, every world in their empires, every consciousness in their databases. You have come here thinking you are heroes, trying to stop a threat to universal stability. But you are not heroes. You are accomplices. The reality anchors activated. Suddenly, every being in the alien fleet found their consciousness connected to a vast network that Elena had been building for weeks. They were forced to experience something that none of them had ever faced, the accumulated suffering of every species the Zephyrians had ever harvested. But it wasn't just the Zephyrian crimes they experienced. Elena had done something far more comprehensive. She had gathered the memories of every atrocity, every act of cruelty, every moment of unnecessary suffering that galactic civilization had permitted to happen. The Andromedans, who thought of themselves as peaceful explorers, suddenly felt the pain of every world they had abandoned to the Zephyrians rather than fight. The Centauri Federation experienced the anguish of every species they had failed to defend because it wasn't profitable. The Orion Trade Alliance felt the despair of every slave market they had ignored because it didn't affect their business. This was the Great Accounting. Not just punishment for the Zephyrians, but judgment for every species that had allowed the harvest to continue. Every civilization that had looked the other way while others suffered. Every government that had chosen comfort over justice. You want to know why we threaten reality itself? Elena's voice echoed through 3 million alien minds simultaneously. Because your reality is built on suffering. Your peace is bought with the pain of those weaker than you. Your civilization is a lie constructed on the bones of the innocent. The alien fleet began to tear itself apart, not from human weapons, but from the weight of their own accumulated guilt. Crews turned on their officers as they realized their complicity in galactic atrocities. Ships fired on their own allies as species-wide shame transformed into desperate rage. But Elena wasn't finished. The 17 versions of humanity had one final gift for the galaxy. You will remember this, she declared as reality storms swirled around the human fleet. Every one of you will carry the genetic memory of this moment. Your children will be born knowing what you are capable of. Your descendants will feel the pain of your victims as if it were their own. The Great Accounting reached its crescendo. Across the alien fleet, millions of beings experienced a fundamental change in their neural structures. The weight of galactic history, the accumulated suffering of countless species, became permanently encoded in their DNA. They would never be able to cause suffering again without feeling it themselves. Their children would be born with an instinctive understanding of pain, an inability to harm others without experiencing identical agony. 200 years had passed since the Great Accounting, and the galaxy was a very different place. Captain Tavara of the Andromedian Collective floated in her command chamber, her crystalline body reflecting the soft light of distant stars. She was documenting the aftermath of humanity's war for the historical archive, a project that had taken her entire career to complete. The battle in the void had lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it ended, the combined fleet of 7 species had been fundamentally changed. Not destroyed, but transformed in ways that still echoed through galactic civilization 2 centuries later. Tavara reviewed her notes one final time before making her final report. The numbers were staggering, but the real story lay in what couldn't be measured: the psychological transformation of an entire galaxy. Archive entry 779, Tavara spoke into the recording device. Final assessment of the human war and its consequences. She paused, remembering her grandmother's stories about the old days when the Andromedians had been free to explore the galaxy without feeling the weight of others' suffering. Those days seemed like a distant dream now. The Zephyrian hegemony, as a political entity, ceased to exist within hours of the Great Accounting. not through military defeat, but through psychological collapse. Every member of their species now carries the genetic memory of every atrocity they committed across 12,000 years of galactic dominance. Tavara had interviewed surviving Zephyrians for her research. They were pitiful creatures now, unable to harm even the smallest insect without experiencing identical pain themselves. Their former victims, the consciousness they had trapped in their ships for centuries, had all been freed during the reality storm. Many had chosen to remain as energy beings, forming a collective that watched over the galaxy to prevent future harvests. The other Alliance species fared little better, Tavara continued. The Centauri Federation disbanded within a decade, its member worlds unable to function under the weight of collective guilt. The Orion Trade Alliance collapsed when its merchants found themselves unable to profit from others' suffering. My own people, the Andromedians, have spent 2 centuries trying to make amends for our passive complicity in galactic atrocities. But the most significant change wasn't political or economic. It was biological. The Great Accounting had done something unprecedented in galactic history. It had rewritten the genetic code of 7 different species. Every individual who had been present in the void now carried modified DNA that was passed to their children. The modification was simple but absolute. Any action that caused suffering to others would be immediately felt by the person causing it. The humans called it justice, Tavara recorded. We call it the most terrifying form of mercy imaginable. The genetic modification had spread beyond the original 7 species. Marriage between different galactic races was common, and the Yas modified genes were dominant. Within a century, most of the galaxy's population carried the human-imposed limitation. War had become nearly impossible. Crime rates had dropped to almost 0. Even minor acts of cruelty, like harsh words or unfair business practices, caused immediate psychological feedback that made them unbearable to the perpetrator. Tavara closed her files and prepared to make her final entry. She had spent 200 years studying humanity's actions, trying to understand what kind of species could orchestrate such a comprehensive transformation of galactic civilization. The humans achieved something that no other species in galactic history had managed, she spoke into the recorder. They didn't just defeat their enemies. They eliminated the capacity for the kind of evil that had led to their own suffering. But humanity's victory had come at a cost that was only now becoming clear. The 17 parallel Earths had been cut off from each other permanently when the dimensional gates collapsed. Each version of humanity was now isolated in its own universe, unable to contact or assist the others. The weapons they had used in the void had left permanent scars in reality itself, weak points where physics worked differently and time flowed at irregular speeds. Most tragically, Earth Prime remained dead. The original Earth, the one whose destruction had triggered the war, was still a lifeless world orbiting a lonely star. Dr. Elena Vasquez had died in her bunker shortly after the Great Accounting, her body finally succumbing to radiation exposure from the quantum equipment. But her legacy lived on in ways she had never imagined. On the world of Kepler 442b, a planet that had been designated for colonization by the old Zephyrian hegemony, something unexpected was happening. The planet's surface was covered with structures that looked almost like cities, but no one had built them. They had simply appeared, growing from the ground like crystalline flowers. Research teams had discovered that the structures were alive, in a sense. They were composed of pure consciousness, the freed souls of beings who had been harvested by the Zephyrians over thousands of years. These entities had chosen to work together, creating a new form of existence that transcended individual species. At the center of the largest structure was something that the researchers called the Memory Palace. It contained the complete history of every species that had ever been harvested, preserved in crystalline matrices that anyone could access. But it also contained something else, Elena Vasquez's consciousness, somehow preserved and integrated. into the collective. Tavara had visited the memory palace during her research. Elena's essence had spoken to her, not through words, but through direct transfer of knowledge and emotion. The war was never about revenge, Elena had communicated. It was about teaching. The galaxy needed to learn that some actions have consequences. That echo across time and space. The memory palace had become a pilgrimage site for species across the galaxy. Beings came to experience the memories of those who had suffered, to understand the weight of actions and choices. It had become a place of learning, where the accumulated wisdom of the dead taught the living how to avoid repeating the sins of the past. But the galaxy had also learned to fear. Tavara's research had uncovered dozens of first-contact scenarios, where new species had encountered the legend of humanity. The pattern was always the same: initial communication, then a careful inquiry about whether the newcomers were human. When the answer was no, contact proceeded normally. But every species in the galaxy now knew the same basic facts about humanity. They were the species that had rewritten the moral structure of the galaxy. They were the ones who had made empathy a biological requirement rather than a choice. They were the monsters who had turned themselves into the galaxy's conscience. Children across the galaxy grew up with the same nursery rhyme, translated into hundreds of different languages, but always carrying the same message. When monsters come to play, remember what we are. We are the ones who make the monsters prey. Tavara made her final entry into the historical archive. 200 years after the human war, we live in a galaxy where suffering has consequences, where cruelty is impossible without immediate punishment, where the capacity for evil has been bred out of most species. She paused, looking out at the stars through her command chamber's viewing port. We are safer now. We are kinder now. We are more just now. But we are also constantly reminded that this peace came at the cost of our free will. Humanity didn't just defeat us. They changed what it means to be alive in this galaxy. As if summoned by her thoughts, her communication system activated. A message was arriving from deep space, beyond the galactic rim. Tavara had been expecting this for weeks. The message was from a species that called themselves the Helix Consortium. They were newcomers to the galaxy, explorers from a distant cluster who had recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their communication was polite, but direct. Greetings to the people of the Milky Way galaxy. We have heard legends about your history and the species called humanity. We wish to learn from your wisdom and avoid the mistakes of previous civilizations. We do not wish to experience humanity's justice, as we have heard it described. Tavara smiled, an expression that would have been impossible for her grandmother's generation. The genetic modifications had given her species the ability to feel genuine joy when others avoided suffering. How do we earn humanity's mercy? The message continued. Tavara began composing her reply, using the same words that had been used in first contact situations for 2 centuries. Don't make us define it for you. The response would be transmitted across the galaxy, another warning to another species about the consequences of causing unnecessary suffering. But it was also something else. Proof that humanity's greatest sin had become the galaxy's greatest blessing. They had attacked Earth first. Yes. But in doing so, they had awakened something in humanity that had transformed an entire galaxy. The echoes of that awakening would continue to reverberate across the void for millions of years to come. And somewhere in the memory palace on Kepler 442b, Elena Vasquez's consciousness smiled as she felt another species choose compassion over cruelty. The war was over. The education would continue forever.